Hi, thanks for stopping by. Before we get started, just a quick comment from the video editor. In this one, I've kept in some fairly long clips of the machining. Now normally I keep them quite short just to keep the pace of the video moving along quickly. But because we're working in brass and because some people I know like to see those clips, this time I've left them in. The second point is, somebody recently made a comment that they really don't like the fades that I put in between the clips in my videos. Now I use a lot of clips in my videos, and personally I don't like the jerk that you get when you move from one scene to the next without a fade. But they do take me a lot of time to put in, and actually if that person, was representative, then I could save myself a lot of time by not including them. I prefer to keep them in personally, but if you all feel that I'd be better off without them, just leave me a comment. I might do a majority vote on it, or I might take no notice. I'll just have to decide. I hope you enjoy the video. Welcome to Haxby Shed. A friend of mine has got a Lambretta 125 Model 5C, first launched I think in 1951. And unfortunately he's broken the union that fits on the bottom of the petrol tank. So he's asked me to make another. I'll show you. Well, you can see what's happened, look. This is the union, and he's over-tightened it and he's snapped this threaded end off. And this end goes into the bottom of the petrol tank and it clamps on a fuel gauge here, and then it goes on to feed the engine through this tap here. So I've drawn it up. It's 18 mil across the flats on this nut here, 23 millimeters diameter at this point, reducing to 17.85, these two here, and then it's threaded at the end with 12 millimeter by 1.5. Now, like a lot of these things, thinking about how to do the job is probably going to take longer than the job itself. I've got myself some brass, because I think the thing would be better in brass. I think I'll start by machining this hex on here. And to index it, I need to hold it in an ER32 collet because that's what I've got. And as this is 17.85, the collet I'm going to choose is an 1817 ER32 collet. Now the problem, or the thing about these collets, is you can't just hold something just in the end here, because this bit at the back here then just squishes in and the collet's no longer parallel. So I'll either have to machine a long stub, the length of this collet really, or maybe two pieces, the piece I'm working on at this end and maybe some kind of packer at this end. I've got a couple of options to hold and index that 18mm collet, and I can either use the Spindexer, which is a little bit of overkill, but it's an option, or I could use one of these. Now this has only arrived this morning. I got one hexagon and one square indexing block, and the pair were about £43, which is about 52 US dollars, or actually about 52 euros at the moment, because dollars and euros, American dollars and euros, are about 1 to 1. There are advantages to both ways actually, and I'll set it up on my shaper with the milling head attachment. If I use the hex block, I just put it in the vise like that, and we've got a shoulder here to push up against, so I'd always get it in the same place. This vise would have to be turned 90 degrees because my shaper table only goes left to right. There's no mechanism to go backwards and forwards, not sensibly anyway. So I think that would work, and I'll just turn this for each cut like that, if you can see. The alternative of using the Spindexer has the advantage that I've got a lot more clearance everywhere. I'll decide nearer the time which one I'm going to use. Well, that's the thinking part done, so I'll get changed and we'll start on the lathe machining that 17.85mm stub that's going to go into the collet, and then we'll machine the hex on. This is a Lambretta Model 5C, look. This is what the complete fitting looks like. So the part that I'm going to make is kind of, oh, I can't see it down there, look. First, I'm going to machine this down to this diameter, which is 23, and then I'll machine at 17.85 down to this edge here. And then that will sit in the collet like that when I machine this hex. So obviously I'm going to part this off here. I'm going to make that hex nut a little bit longer, and I may leave a bit extra on at this end. I'm going to drill a hole all the way through, but I'm not going to drill it out to the final size because I've got to do some threading. I need to do some threading, I didn't show it before, inside that hole there. And obviously I've got to thread this, and I don't want to twist it off like that. So I'll drill the finished hole later after I've already threaded it. I'm only going to use a tap and a die. I'm not going to do single point threading because, to be honest, I don't need to. So I've already sized this at 23. .2mm rough cut to here. Finish cut at 17.85. Slight change of plan. I can do a bit more machining on this side than I realised. What I can do here is reduce this to 12, which will be the final threaded size of this, and then I can machine these now, and then I'll drill it, then I'll part it off. I'll just hold that in a 12mm collet, that's all. 12mm finish. You know, on jobs like this, working out the sequencing steps is often quite difficult, and even now I'm still not sure what's the best thing to do next. So I think what I'll do is I'll drill a small hole through the middle. That's a pretty safe step, isn't it? I'll go and have a coffee and think it through a bit more. Right, back after the break. I'm going to chamfer these edges slightly, then I'm going to part it off, and then I'll take it over to the milling head and we'll mill that hex nut on it. Let's do this on automatic. To some extent, this shaper milling head is still experimental. I don't have a milling machine, that's why I made it. So this is the first actual real use of the shaper milling head. I may hit some snags, I don't know. Maybe a little bit more development to do yet. But as I bring the table across, it should just touch off on that brass. Well, that's done a little bit more than touching off, so I just have to allow for that. I need to do a cut of 2.5 millimeters, so maybe I'll just make it 2.4, something like that. Do it on that on the other side, and there should be 18 millimeters across the flats. I'm just going to go across with a 2 millimeter cut, then 2 millimeters on the opposite side, and see where we've got to. I don't want to mess it up. Well, that's looking all right at the moment. I don't have a power feed on this table. I do have a plan, but at the moment I'm turning the handle manually. By my reckoning, when I do this cut, I'll have 19 across the flats, and then I'll decide how much extra to take off. Well, I've cut both sides, but I'm not happy with it because it's cutting more off one side than the other. Doesn't make sense to me. I can only think that it's because this block is not locating correctly in the vise. The vise has quite a short base, if you like, below the jaws, and I think this is kind of tipping. So I'm going to try it now in the Spindexer and see if I can get more reliable results. I got there in the end, but I found that the Spindexer is far, far more reliable at indexing than these blocks. And there's nothing wrong with the blocks, it's simply they don't sit in my vise very well. So it's, when you turn them over, it's not really a repeatable process. Got to think about that. Anyway, it's done. So on to the next stage. The tapping drill for a 12mm by 1.5 is 10.7mm. Now I haven't got a 10.7, but I do have a 10.3. So we'll try it with that, and in brass it may be okay. A bit tight, but it should be all right. This is an intermediate tap, I think. I don't have a plug tap. I think this will be okay. I made this nut deeper for that reason. But if need be, we'll just have to buy a plug tap. They're not very expensive, actually. I'm leaving this loose to allow for various misalignments. My hex isn't perfect, but also, you know, when I put the die into this, it doesn't hold it dead center. That's better. Put it into reverse. Looks all right, doesn't it? I'm going to reverse the die and then cut it by hand right down to that shoulder, hopefully, because there's no taper on the other side of the die. Next I'm going to part it off, so I've got 10mm there. Obviously I've threaded far too much, but I just didn't know how it was going to go, and the bar was there anyway, so, you know, if it had messed up in this section, I probably could have done something about it and I wouldn't have damaged this part, which I need. I think I'll stop there and cut it with a hacksaw. Well, that's finished. As ever, there's a few lessons that I could take away. It's always difficult when you get new tools, and it takes a little while to understand how best to use them. But, you know, overall, I'm happy with that. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Hacks be shared.